Deepa, it's a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for coming to college. I really do.
It's a pleasure. I think it depends on how you look at poverty. The tradition amongst the economists has been to define a poverty line. And that leads to endless discussion, redefinition, controversy, because each time you change the definition, you really don't know whether it's the actual numbers that have moved out of poverty or it's because of the change in the measure. I think a better way of defining poverty is by asking people themselves. Because people in poverty, who live in poverty, know poverty the best. And the job of outsiders is to really understand what living in poverty is like and what their problems are, what their priorities are. Then we make sensible policies. But if we keep defining it and spend so much time and money on definitional issues, I don't think the discourse moves forward as effectively as it would. I just want to say one more thing on that. I think one of the key findings from our research was, and we did this with 60,000 people, is that poverty is not a static concept. It's a dynamic concept, which means that people are constantly moving in and out of poverty. So if you take a snapshot at one point in time, you may have people who just fallen into poverty, but in the next season will move out of poverty. So one needs a dynamic. In fact, our study found that 50% of people who'd been in poverty at one time are not poor. And those who were previously not poor are in poverty. So then it really is, we need a movie, not a snapshot. I don't know what he means by that. I think it's very easy to be misunderstood. I think the work that he's done in actually going out, and I visited some of the programs that have been financed by the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, and initially I didn't know it, and they are really impressive. I've traveled to at least several villages, and I'm going out again, and the women I spoke to, and it wasn't one or two, I met hundreds of women, and without any officials around, and what they were saying constantly is how their lives have changed. And from their perspective, again, what comes out as poverty is multidimensional. And the thing they talked about the most was that before they lived in fear, and now they can hold their heads high, live in dignity, they are respected, and they have no fear. That the world is very different now than it was 50, 100 years ago when a lot of deterioracy comes to the And the single fact that is really, really critical is these theories were dreamt of in a world of indefinite resources. Now we know that resources, especially environmental resources, are not indefinite. They're finite. And that changes everything. Secondly, if you think about the Industrial Revolution in the UK in the late 19th century, and you think of the Industrial Revolution in countries like India, Brazil, late developing countries, it's a totally different context. So to think that would apply to a small island state will apply to a billion people trying to live and grow in India or in Pakistan, Bangladesh, I think is foolish. I think the switch from the word sex-based, which is really biology to gender, was to signify that differences between men and women are cultural and social rather than determined by biology. I think you cannot really talk about gender differences without talking about both men and women, because it's interrelated. If women change, men have to change. If men change, women have to change, since the majority is still in male-female relationships, at least in India, so that's really important. I think in India, the challenge really is to, and that's what we'll be talking about, I think the biggest challenge right now is to really examine what being woman means, what womanhood means, what's the cultural definition, how do people internalize it, because the rape, the violence against women, the numbers are so mind-boggling and so morally wrong that we have to look at it.
It seems to be a problem which is endemic and specific to India. So why is that? I mean, rape, isn't rape irrational?
Is it really?
Irrational? Like, how do you sensitize people against it?
I think these are all very good questions. I think basically we have to, as has been talked about in the press, we have to have a functioning legal system, police system, but I think the most important shift has to occur in people's minds. It's started off with my personal agony after the IRA, because I grew up in Delhi, I'm a Delhi girl. And it just, I think like lots of people, it just shook my sense of comfort, complacency, and through a process of months of looking at myself and what's my responsibility, looking at really what are the cultural messages that we send girls with girls, because girls become women, and what do we teach girls, how do we teach them to behave, to hold themselves down? Because if girls are taught not to speak up, if girls are taught that they have to be ashamed of their bodies or deny their bodies, if girls are taught to hide or to just be pleasers, then basically I feel that we're teaching ourselves not to exist. And if you don't exist, then anything is possible in terms of violence.
Thank you so much again for making this video. I think the fun. We love the board. Thank you so much.